friends, welcome back to the Homestead. Today I have a mess of rhubarb that we are going to take care of, and we're actually going to make a savory application today. We are going to make rhubarb barbecue sauce. My name is Becky and this is Acre Homestead, and I just went out this morning and actually harvested all this rhubarb. If you don't have rhubarb plants at your house, no worries. This is the perfect time to go out to the farmer's market in your area or even your local grocery store. It has rhubarb, I guarantee you right now. Now, if you have grown your own rhubarb, you may know the struggle of how do you preserve or how do you put up rhubarb and it's not just a pie. I actually have a rhubarb pie in the oven right now, or in a dessert, because there's only so much dessert, you know, that you necessarily want to eat, especially when you get the amount of rhubarb that I do. Now, this is only the first harvest. Rhubarb you can harvest multiple times throughout the season. That's why I needed to find a way to preserve rhubarb in not just a sweet application. And so I found in my absolute favorite canning cookbook, this is the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. It's the most complete book I found. My mom actually bought this for me when I first started canning, and I haven't even needed another canning book because everything I've needed is right in here. And now I've been canning for over 7 years. So I'll link this book along with all the canning equipment that I will be using if you're interested in it down in the description below. I found a Victorian barbecue sauce, and that is what we are going to be making today, barbecue sauce. And this is one of our absolute favorite barbecue sauces now. My favorite way actually to use this barbecue sauce is to make barbecue pizza. I'm doing a very rough chop on these because they're actually gonna be cooking down. I'm not sure how many actual recipes of this barbecue sauce I'm gonna be making because I'm gonna just measure out the rhubarb and then I'll double, triple, quadruple the recipe depending on how much rhubarb I get. One recipe calls for 8 cups of rhubarb. I wasn't sure how I was gonna measure this, but what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take a quart jar. I know this is not gonna be exact 4 cups, so I'm gonna just go ahead and measure it this way. So that's 4 cups. So 2 of these makes 1 recipe. This is the exact amount of rhubarb to make a quadruple batch. We are gonna make this barbecue sauce in my pressure cooker, and I'm gonna use it as a stock pot. One recipe calls for 1/2 cup of onion, so that would be 2 cups total for me. And I'm gonna go ahead and do 1 red onion and 1 white onion. This can be really roughly chopped because it's all gonna be blended and stewed and cooked down together. The recipe calls for 1/2 cup of white vinegar, so I need 2 cups of vinegar total. I am gonna go ahead and put 1 cup of white vinegar. And then I'm gonna put a cup of apple cider vinegar just to give a little bit more flavor dimension. Now we need 12 cups of brown sugar. Now I make my own brown sugar video up here, but I don't have that much made. And all brown sugar is white sugar and molasses. So I'm gonna add 12 cups of white sugar, and then for every 1 cup of sugar, I'll add 1 tablespoon of molasses. So we'll also add 12 tablespoons of molasses. There's 8 tablespoons in 1 cup, so we are gonna add 1 1/4 cups of molasses. I like to buy all my ingredients in bulk, and I get the majority of them from Azure Standard. And I can link all of those below as well for you, if you're interested in checking them out. Now we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of salt. This is pink Himalayan salt, but you could add whatever kind of salt you want as long as it's not iodized salt. Anytime you're canning, you don't want to use any iodized salt, and most table salts are iodized, so just make sure you look at that before you make this recipe if you're going to can it. So now we need 6 cups of raisins. This is a quart jar, so I know that there's 4 cups in here, and then we'll get 2 more cups. Now this recipe is called the Victorian barbecue sauce, and it's called that because it's got allspice, cinnamon, and ginger in it, and those are very historic and Victorian time spices. I added those last year and I liked the flavor of it, but today I want to make more of a traditional flavored barbecue sauce, so I'm going to go ahead and skip those spices. I'm actually going to add a few of my own spices. Now when you're canning, you need to be very careful when you start changing recipes and substituting them. You want to make sure you're making a shelf-stable product. And I know that just by switching the spices, I'm going to be fine because I'm going to be adding the same quantity of spices, just different spices. I'm not changing the amount of sugar or vinegar. Those are the 2 big things that you need to make sure that you have the proper ratios of when you're canning. So as long as you keep your sugar and vinegar, it's okay to switch up the spices just a little bit. So I'm going to be adding 2 tablespoons of dry mustard powder, 2 tablespoons of paprika, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons of chipotle powder, and about 1.5 teaspoons of red Korean pepper flakes. Those are just going to go in here. And then I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of black pepper. And I just realized it's actually 14 cups of sugar, not 12. So I'm gonna add that right now. This is definitely not a keto-friendly recipe, but we're not keto, so that's okay. We are ready to move on to the next step. This has been sitting here boiling probably actually for about an hour. It took a long time for this huge pot to get going. So I think it's ready now. The rhubarb is really soft. I did taste it and it did need a little bit more salt, so I added that off camera. But I am now gonna use my immersion blender. If you guys don't have one of these, do yourself a favor and go get yourself an immersion blender. I absolutely love it. I had wanted one for years and I never bought it because if I didn't have this, I would have to use a blender to do this. I'd have to scoop this hot liquid into a blender, blend it, and it's just a whole thing. But instead, I can take this immersion blender, put this into my pot, and I don't have to dirty an extra dish, and I don't have to worry about moving hot liquid and burning myself or anything like that. So we have our pot of rhubarb barbecue sauce ready to be canned up. I've got a canning funnel here, and all I'm gonna do is ladle them into these clean jars, and I'm gonna give about a ½ inch of headspace for each jar. And now all we're gonna do is take a little bit of distilled vinegar and wipe the rims and make sure the rims are nice and clean. While we're wiping the rims, we're gonna feel to make sure there's no chips or dings or anything in any of the jars. We're doing this to get any stickiness out of the way so that we get a nice, good seal on our jars. You don't wanna go through all this effort and then have food on the rim and cause a jar not to seal. And then take a new lid and put a new lid on each jar. Take a ring and put a ring on each jar. We have our hot barbecue sauce in our jars, which have heated up the jars. And now I'm gonna go ahead and put them in this really hot water. It's kind of simmering actually already. I'm gonna go ahead and lower these down into the boiling water. This is already boiling, so I'm gonna go ahead and set the timer for 15 minutes. When you're canning, just make sure that you look at your elevation and your canning times because it could be different than where I am. So the timer went off for this one. This one is still going. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat off, and I'm gonna let them just sit in here for about 10 minutes and just kind of let them naturally cool just a bit before we take them out of the canner. Well friends, here we have it. We have 18 pints of rhubarb barbecue sauce. I had a little bit extra that I just threw in the fridge because it wasn't enough to can. But I'm gonna let these cool completely. Music to a canner's ears. That means that jar is sealing. That's what that ping is. I'll take the rings off, I'll mark them, and I'll put them in the pantry. I'm excited that I changed up the flavor profile on this one. I already have about 8 or 9 pints left over from last year where I followed the recipe exactly. I think I'm gonna enjoy having this as a more traditional barbecue sauce flavor, and I really still like that Victorian flavor. It'll just depend on what I'm cooking and what I'm in the mood for, whether I want this or that. I hope you guys give this a try. It's so good, and it's a fantastic way to use rhubarb in a savory application as opposed to just a sweet one, because we all know, you know, the sweet recipes. If you guys enjoyed this, I hope you give it a thumbs up. If you want to see what else I've got going on around here, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're interested in any of my other videos that I already have out, there will be some that are going to pop up right on the side here, and you can go enjoy those if you'd like. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye guys.